After 28 weeks, it's down to this. Collingwood versus Brisbane at the MCG. The two best sides all year in a grand final repeat of 02 and 03. Brown, Ackermanis, Lappin and Black, Buckley, Burns, Tarrant and Shaw. Now it's Neale, McCluggage and Danaher, Elliott, DeGoey and Darcy Moore. Who will rise to the occasion? Make sure their names are forever remembered. Put it all on the line one more time to lift the cup on the last Saturday of September. Casting our eyes towards the weekend's action for the last time in 2023, this is Triple M Footy's Midweek Rub with three-time grand finalist Joey Montagna.
Hello, Rabsy. Last one for the year. Very excited, but big week as well.
Huge week. 2010 Premiership player Daisy Thomas.
Thank you very much, Rabbits. What a week it is going to be. And how's the bloody weather in this fine city? Turned it on a treat.
And a man who's covered grand finals for over 2 decades now, Damien Barrett.
Rabsy, Joey, Days. Yeah, massive storyline still to play out between now and Saturday, aren't there, with a few injury fronts, which we'll touch on in the news segment.
What is your favourite grand final just in those 20 years, just off the top of our head? Have you sort of got one that stands out that sort of is more memorable?
Yeah, look, I reckon, and this might be a good answer for you, but I reckon the 209 one, just for its brutality, that takes some beating, I reckon, from that aspect of it. The 18 one too, just for its drama with Dom Sheets, I feel too. And what Darren Jarman did in 2 consecutive years, one against the team I barracked for in 08, but particularly 207, just in that last quarter. I think they're the ones that, without sort of analysing it too deeply, Joey, but they're the ones that jump off always,
It is a massive week, and especially for the journos, because there are lots of news stories knocking around, good, bad and indifferent, but when you waltz in today in a sharp, freshly pressed suit with a blue tie done up, you got the fresh white shirt on underneath, this doesn't scream to me that you're breaking news. This screams to me that you've been somewhere or you're going somewhere or potentially both.
It smells like money.
I'd like
crisp sheets.
I'd like to push back, Days, but you've read the and observed accurately what's happened. I've been somewhere and I'm going somewhere.
So you've done a breakfast as we record this around midday.
Yep.
You've gone to a breakfast.
Yep.
On a panel or?
It's a corporate one, sort of an intimate corporate arrangement.
Now, high-level stuff.
Well, and you know the corporates.
That's right. It's not just a little...
No, it's more just something that happens every year. And I've got a lunch today in the city as well, so
So out of the three of us, you've been the busiest so far.
Well, look at you two. You're both in your black
I didn't think this was going to happen.
No, I expected both of you to be wound up like a top for these types of arrangements, but Joey's got nothing.
No, not my go. Just my normal week as usual, but it's all good. Hey, want to shout out to you, by the way, before
I'm kicking into gear.
Get to yours. Tomorrow. Shout out to you for Daisy's Brownlow hosting, by the way, Channel 7. That was very, very good work, Daisy.
Thank you very much.
You wouldn't have seen it, would you? Because you were
I was in the room.
Yeah,
so I saw you do was it Mark of the Year?
I did do Mark of the Year, Goal of the Year.
I missed the pre-match.
Some of the pre-match stuff, and well done, Daisy.
No, thank you very much.
Nice
it was good. The Goal of the Year that I sort of just made a little bit about myself might have
caused a little bit of a stir.
Well,
I just hear Kane Cornes had a little clip last night.
Did he?
Couldn't help himself.
Kane Cornes had a go at you.
He had a small go.
Said it wasn't funny, a little gag. I liked it. I thought it was funny.
I thought it was quite humorous.
By the way,
gave me a shout out.
That ball wasn't out of bounds.
My back foot was out. Absolutely ridiculous, but I'm not sure
the
we're going
to... is it? The ball's got to be out. It's not like the NFL if your foot's out.
I'm not sure we're going to go to Kane Cornes to be the Minister of Fun Police.
We've nearly gone through half a year without you two,
He's just making sure that I won't be going there just for advice on fun and humour.
Take us behind the scenes. What time did your day start at the Brownlow?
Mate, it was a long day, so we did a lot of recording for Crown, behind the scenes of how many shirts and glasses and all of that. So that was done, some of it last Saturday, but also some on the day. Did some other stuff with Abby Holmes throughout. So midday to sort of midnight was the...
Midnight? Who's buying midnight?
Oh, actually, this is going to be later. So I did wander in a touch later than that, but I sent Tash a text when I got home saying, yada, yada. Rang her in the morning. She goes, how was your night? I said, yeah, not too bad. I got home about 2. And she goes, no, you didn't. You sent me a photo at 3:18 with you and Ben Cousins. I said, well, yeah, okay, maybe that's not the greatest story to run with and maybe not the greatest character reference at that hour. But anyway, we pushed on. It was a good, fun night. I'm still going to put my hand up, I think, and send an email to the AFL because I think they need a party liaison. They need someone to just take control of their functions because they all just still have a waft of AFL about them. Right. It's a little bit straight up and down. I feel like...
So did you go to the Merriwell one?
I did, yeah.
And then wandered from there
No, that was it.
That was it.
Just walked out of that when it shut down. So, yeah.
And Cuzzy wanted to go to the next venue. Daisy said, I think that's my cue.
Oh, mate, I had a big crush on Ben Cousins when he played. He was, and mate, he still looks...
He looked good, didn't he?
Thanks for him. He looks as good as he ever have. He seems really in a good place as well. So... it was good to have a yarn to him.
Well, your grand final predictions still to come, plus fair income or Fugazi. But up next, it is Damo's news on Triple M Footy's Midweek Rub with Joey, Daisy and Damo. All thanks to Starwood Whiskey, which we all got a bottle today. How good is it? Venture to new horizons with award-winning Starwood Whiskey. Your grand final predictions and fair income or Fugazi are all still to come. But Damo, let's start with some news. And Callum Mills, well, what's happened up at the Swans?
Well, some people, Rabsy, choose to invite dwarves and set them alight on Mad Mondays, and other players choose to wrestle teammates and rip shoulders off bones. So I'm referring to Callum Mills. Can we get away with that, by the way?
Damo.
I'm distancing myself from all of these comments.
Well, did it happen, Joey?
What? Not sure.
According to a current affair.
Well, I saw a current affair.
That's right.
Anyway, Callum Mills.
Talk about Callum Mills.
We'll move on, will we? Yeah. Okay. Well, Callum Mills, inexplicably, as much as your story was many years ago, has managed to get himself into a Mad Monday type of wrestle match with a teammate, a young player who hasn't played a game of footy. But ultimately, he could be out for 12 months. It's that serious what he's done. He's taken the part of the muscle off the bone of his shoulder.
So on the rotator cuff?
The rotator cuff, yeah. I think it was Tom Morris or Sam. And one of the two has reported that specifically. But I know it's serious enough outside of that to know it's not ready for round one type of material. And to think that this is a guy now who is going to be 27 next year, who is a captain of a footy club, who had an All-Australian year in 2022, wasn't as good in 2023 like a few of his teammates. But look, I know this stuff goes on, but it's not acceptable and it's not good enough, particularly for a leader of the club to find himself in this situation. You're not so sure about my take on
which
that?
Bit of it's
What's not acceptable?
The fact
having
that
a
he's
muck around wrestle with a mate.
Hang on, are you trying to validate this action?
I'm not validating it, but I don't want to get caught in this hysteria. I'm not, and I reckon Daisy's with me. We're not going to get in this path that what he's done is inappropriate.
It's not deliberate.
It's not deliberate. An accident's happened.
Oh, come on, guys! I'm actually with you on this. Players need lives. Yeah. I said Jordan Ngoe should go to Bali whenever he wants if he's got 5 days off, 6 days off. But to get yourself damaged this way in a Mad Monday debacle,
that could happen in anything. You could be playing.
No, that doesn't happen in anything, Joey.
But it could. You could be playing social basketball with some mates over summer. And
social basketball, yeah.
So, but you could
Mad Monday wrestling with a teammate.
If you want to make it a Mad Monday, he's having a wrestle.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah. So what do you? I just think it's an unfortunate accident, and he's going to be sheepish, and he's going to feel bad. He's let the team down, and the team's going to suffer. But sometimes these things happen. Of course, it's not ideal.
I think you're being too lenient on a captain of a footy club to find himself in this situation.
So Daisy, how many blokes would have a muck around wrestle?
Yeah, heaps is the answer. A simple answer is heaps. And there's lots of things that could cause injury on those days. But also, being sober and crossing a road isn't the safest thing of all time. If you break a leg doing that, do we worry about? We saw Glenn Maxwell throughout the year jumping on a trampoline at a mate's party and broke his leg. These things happen from time to time, Damo. It's rather
especially when you have a drink. When you have a drink, which is entitled to have a drink.
But that's the point.
You're entitled to have a drink.
You can have a drink without pulling your shoulder off the
but
boat.
it shouldn't be a character assassination after the fact. Like, he's stuffed up, he's the captain, yes, but does it need to be a pile-on?
Listen, I'm not one to ban players from activities, but I've got a real issue with this one. I really do. As a leader of this footy club, he's been in the system now for nearly 10 years, and for his club to not have access to him, potentially for more than half a season next year, and again, let's see that play out. Let's see him rehabilitated, but I can't imagine. And again, as I keep
anyone who has a muck around wrestle with their mates, it's absolutely inappropriate.
I'm staggered that you were trying to validate
anyone
this.
who has a muck around wrestle with their mates,
if you're an AFL player earning $700 to $1 million, which Callum Mills will be on,
and you have a muck around wrestle,
you don't have a muck around wrestle with alcohol on a Mad Monday. Right. I'm staggered you've got this view, and as though it's let's move on.
Ollie Wine's doing it wakeboarding and missing a chunk and not coming back the same. That's
I didn't have
different.
as big an issue with that because that was post-season recreational activity. But at the same time, there's not alcohol involved in that, Joey.
But the alcohol isn't the reason that his arm broke off. The other guy was a better wrestler.
I reckon it might have had something to do with it on a Mad Monday. Again, I want to hear what he says about it. But I just don't. It's not condonable, and I would love to see and would love to know exactly what John Longmire said when he was told about this.
He'll be fuming because he's missing his captain and his best player for all of pre-season and for some of the season. That absolutely is true.
I'd be taking the captaincy off him too.
Would you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
What sort of leadership is this? I'm staggered you don't have the same view.
I have the view that it's certainly not deliberate, though. Like, I feel like if he got in a car and drove or something, 100% take the captaincy off him. To have a an accident, which it surely was, he wouldn't have gone into that day hoping that his arm was about to be taken off for 12 months.
But you can go into the day saying to yourself, I'm the captain and there's alcohol involved here. It's dangerous enough
I better
in itself.
sit in the corner and just make sure I don't do anything.
Did you have the same view on Luke Hodge prelim
I like
final
a drink
week
as much as anyone, and you guys know that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, you touch wood on that when you have these conversations, but to come out of a Mad Monday with a busted shoulder, having endured a season of footy where you're banged up anyway.
You don't know how innocuous it was. You're making out like he was having a UFC-style fight with a mate and diving off chairs. He could have just innocuously had a muck around wrestle, slipped over and his arm came out.
I think that is what happened. I think it was innocuous.
So how can you say then it's inexplicable if it's innocuous?
Because why you put yourself in that situation?
You just said you're going to take the captaincy off him for an innocuous act.
He's put himself in a situation that his club could do without.
Having a drink.
Did you have this same view when Luke Hodge got done driving before a prelim?
He should not have been allowed to play that first final, and the way that club and he dealt with that, and the way the AFL system allowed that. That was a reigning premiership captain. Again, blew over the limit going into a final series, and then we just move on as though I said sorry. Now, again, I had that view at the time.
That's all right. At least you're consistent.
And that is more serious than what Callum Mills has done.
Well, absolutely.
A lot more serious than what Callum Mills has done.
All right. We'll agree to disagree.
Brett Ratten has returned to the Hawks team.
He has, yeah. So we knew he was going to take up a senior assistant role once he decided to leave North Melbourne Footy Club. They're only paying him for 2.5, 3 days a week or thereabouts. It's back at Hawthorn to take a senior overseeing job of all coaching arrangements at that club, and I think it's a great decision for Brett. I think it's one that Sam Mitchell will benefit greatly out of as well.
Yeah, I like it. He's a great footy person. He's got a great footy mind. He's been there. I think he's got a relationship with Sam Mitchell. I think Sam Mitchell's pretty flat that they lost Chris Newman, who was a very important figure as an assistant coach at that footy club. So to get a replacement with his experience, I think it's a great get.
Lachie Neale winning the Brownlow, we'll just touch on it. This debate happens sometimes annually, sometimes every 3 or 4 years about umpires' access. The umpires have to vote on the Brownlow. You can have another award if you want to, but it won't be called the Brownlow. So just remove all that thought process around you. The sharpening up of the access to stats is the latest angle on this, and that came on the result of last year. Remember this week last year, or not long after it, there was a situation where an umpire was stood down over alleged gambling issues around it, so they took away all access to stats. I think they should probably get the borderline stats, but I would hate them to get the champion data full-on analysis assessment of stats.
My mate Dane Swan, who tweets a little bit in and around these spaces, I think has come up with a genius idea. So there's a camera in the room when the umpires cast their votes, and after the fact on Brownlow night, you can actually see the decisions and how they were made. I think that's actually a great... Jason Horne-Francis had 13 touches and got 3 votes. If you were actually to listen to the umpires explain point by point how they got there, I think that would provide clarity.
I agree. I don't think you can do. I can't think you can do that.
Why can't you not, though?
Private conversation, listen to their discussions. But I agree with you that some of the takes about they need to take it off the umpires is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's the umpires award. If you want it to be media people to vote, well, we've got media awards. If you want coaches to vote on it, we've got a coaches award.
The umpires to get it right.
Of course it is. I think they do a great job to get as accurate as they are. Considering what they're doing out on the field, watching a game, we know, Daisy,
it's hard
trying to
give
votes without having without looking at stats at all. It is you do doubt yourself and you question. So to look at stats as a reference point certainly does help. So I think the umpires, they had the top 6 players as the coaches had, who have 2 days, replays, and all the stats to look at to make their decisions. So I think the umpires do a pretty good job. Yes, Lachie Neale got a couple of votes in games he shouldn't, but generally when you win the Brownlow, you get a couple of votes in games you don't expect to, and that's why you end up winning it.
No, I agree with all of that. The recruits from other clubs that are going to be running around on the weekend, it's pretty significant. I think there's 8 or 9 from Collingwood and 7 or 8 from Brisbane Lions. And if you go back to this week last year, both clubs were dealing with prelim final losses. Collingwood went and got McStay and Mitchell, and Brisbane went and got Dunkley, and they brought in Connor McKenna, who played his best game. So, again, I just wanted to raise it, guys, just in the context. And then there's layers to this too. I mean, Collingwood has got previous recruits, and equally Brisbane has got Damo on their list, and Neale, a recruit as well. So clubs just need to keep topping up. I mean, there's been a theory you can grow organically, and yes, you can. No doubt you can. But unless you are constantly identifying talent in advance of the trade period, you're not going to do what Collingwood and Brisbane has done, and that is rectify prelim final losses into grand final appearances the very next year.
And grand finals are the hardest match to get into, obviously, but all those players you said just then had a real impact in their side's prelim final win. Dunkley was huge. Connor McKenna kicked a goal as well. McStay was really good before getting injured. And Tom Mitchell, he has been huge for the Pies. Obviously, a Brownlow medalist can find the footy. Question marks throughout the year if he was in their best side, started as a sub a few times. He's been so important. He's been someone who's in and under, farming the ball out to the runners.
I agree with that.
His role has been pivotal.
And remember the back end of last year, we were chatting about how all the teams at the top of the ladder got stronger. Every team at the top all went and got topped up. So Collingwood and Brisbane were great examples. So did a few other sides. So that's what the reason why they're doing it was to get themselves in this position.
Yeah. And just speaking of the two grand final teams, we know that Collingwood yesterday chose to take Adams out of the conversations for availability. And that seemed likely, unfortunately, for him, given his hamstring issues. But on the early or late Wednesday morning, as we are talking today, Jack Payne is yet to have his status outlined. I would find it highly unlikely with Darcy Gardner coming in for just his third game last week, Joey, but someone who's been in the system 9 years and was able to stand up and play on Charlie Curnow, he's 100% fit as opposed to Jack Payne.
I'd be staggered if Jack Payne plays, but because Darcy Gardner did such a great job and his experience, it's not like it's a kid that sort of you thought, should we go with the experience? I think he'll do a great job. It feels to me that the Taylor Adams one, it looks like he tried to have a crack at training yesterday, which I had to do. And he's probably re-injured it slightly because something similar happened to me early in my career trying to play finals. I did a hamstring round 23 to try and be available to get picked in a prelim. I had to sort of go all out at training.
And got through?
And no, did the hammy again.
Which year was that?
04, back in 2004. So that was I reckon Taylor Adams would have said, they need you to go flat out and test it. And he's probably felt it and said, nah.
And I do love the fact that now that's been tabled.
Yeah.
That's out of the discussion going forward because that would have been a lot of the narrative this week. To have distractions in this week is not ideal, so they can move on.
Just quickly, what would you do with the replacement? Is it Frampton? Rabsy's got a view that he can only play back. I've got a view that he's the most like-for-like option for the McStay absence.
Yeah, I've put my hat on and looked through this a few different ways. I don't think a small ball forward line would be the worst case for Collingwood. A lot of the grand finals are won in and around pressure and constant pressure and locking the ball in your forward half. The only concern is
Ginnivan into the 22?
No, I think he still plays as a sub and you manufacture that another way. I know they love Guinea as a sub because they're not 100% sure he can run out 4 quarters, and especially on a hot day as well. Just the concern is if you go small and Harris Andrews has a big impact, that's going to go a long way to the Lions winning the game.
That's the decision. I was happy for him to go smaller, but I think if you bring Frampton in, I'd bring Frampton to purely play on Harris Andrews. You almost play on him, play behind him, and don't let him have any influence and let the others get to work. That's what I would do with Frampton.
And that allows their structure to stay in place as best it can, albeit not a replacement perfectly for McStay.
And if Ginnivan is the sub then and it's not working, you can inject him earlier than maybe you wanted to.
Well, we'll get your grand final predictions soon, plus your Norm Smith selection as well. But up next, it is fair dinkum or Fugazi and Triple M Footy's Midweek Rub, all thanks to Starwood Whiskey. Grand final predictions about 10 minutes away and fair dinkum or Fugazi, but we are doing it for Starwood Whiskey, by the way, boys. Take whiskey somewhere new with Starwood.
Yeah, mate, just around the corner here in Port Melbourne from ingredients sourced within a day's drive of the distillery.
Which, Joey, has picked up 12 gold medals in the recent San Fran World Spirits Comp.
And we just got a bottle today. It is absolutely delicious. Venture to new horizons with Starwood Whiskey, available from all leading liquor stores.
Now on the Midweek Rub, it's... Fugazi, it's a wazi, it's a woozy, it's a...
You're our stats man, Joey, so I'm going to ask you this one off the top. Brisbane's recent 6-0 record against Collingwood trumps their 3-17 record at the MCG.
There's a lot to take in there. That's like your scorecard one where you're trying to work out the... I don't believe in the 3-17 MCG record because that goes back to when Brisbane were shit. And I don't think that, am I allowed to say that? When Brisbane were no good. Right. So I don't take any relevance to Brisbane's history. I look at because they've played 6 times at the MCG since COVID, and they didn't play during COVID. And they still have a pretty average record, but the Melbourne game this year, they are excellent. They beat Melbourne in the final last year. I'm not too worried about the MCG record. I think they do have a bit of an issue defending the ground, which we'll touch on. They've conceded over 100 points a game in those. But the 3 wins against Collingwood in the last 2 years under Craig McRae would certainly give them a lot of confidence and belief. So to answer that question, I think it is fair dinkum. That makes sense? I'm not sure.
It makes sense. Yeah. Damo, Chris Scott said what 17 other clubs want to about North's priority picks, and just as a reminder, here's what he said.
There is a mechanism of equalisation within the competition already. If you finish second last, you get second pick in the draft, and they've had that for a number of years now because they chose to go down a certain path. Well, the AFL pretty quickly has got to get to the point, in my view, where they just get out of the way and let the system operate without this blatant manipulation.
It's fair dinkum, Rabsy, what you've put to me there. I can't claim it's 17 other clubs, but I could right now claim, let's go with at least 6 that I know of, that I've spoken to, made contact with regarding it, or had conversations about. I agree with the clubs. I agree with Chris Scott. I think it's wrong that the AFL is just handing out first-round draft picks the way they have for this club.
What about the other side of the coin? I thought Gil summed it up really well. What about equalisation doesn't exist? Like, Geelong have been gifted them probably the best father-son combinations of all time. Now, that's not equalisation because that's an advantage that they've been had.
But that is...
And I know it's different, of course, I understand
so
it,
you
but
mean
there's
Hawk
not
and
like
Scarlett
Hawk and
Ablett?
Scarlett Ablett, you know, like it.
I would
there's all
argue
different
that's...
forms. We've got academies. Some teams have really benefited from academies. Others have hardly benefited at all. We've had priority picks. Like, isn't it always compromised our system?
Oh, absolutely it is.
So,
and if I'm Gil, I'm probably making the same argument.
Yeah.
But what you've referred to there and what Gil referred to, in my eyes, they're rules. I mean, whether you like them or not, they're rules that are in place, and you need to then bid for your father's sons, bid for your academy players. North has just been handed a back of first-round pick this year and 2 back of first-round picks next year. They're hard to get first-round draft picks, and North's just been granted 3. And I would argue, Days, that it's their own, which I have been arguing basically for 5 years, certainly since 2019 when they embarked upon this program, that it's their own incompetence that has got them to this very point. And therefore, the rest of the competition now is paying a price to help them get out of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think at some point you've got to take responsibility for where you find yourself in. And for North Melbourne to almost get bailed out by the AFL regularly, apart from having the draft picks, which they have, I don't see how that is fair.
But they've done it this way because they've stopped giving priority picks to stop teams tanking and lose. So you were a priority pick. Hawks won flags with priority picks, but that was because the rule was in place. Now they've taken out that rule to stop tanking, and at their own discretion, they can hand them out. So what would you rather? Have a priority pick for teams and they can tank to deliberately get priority picks, or would you rather the AFL have discretion?
I hated that one as well.
Yeah,
I'm on record. Look, again, I just
interesting.
reckon all form of assistance should just be removed, and the clubs just have to work their way through. And if you then get assistance, it comes with strings attached as to we will have a panel of people telling you what to do with those picks, or allow some industry support outside the club, because the club has had access to high-end picks, Joey.
Yeah.
That's it. It can't retain them. I mean, the one they got recently,
Well,
one of the
maybe not
league...
developing them as well.
And they can't
could give more
develop
money.
them.
Maybe they could have given more money to get an extra development
Well,
coach, or there's some other ways.
That
again,
causes
it's-
problems too.
Yeah.
And at the moment North starts turning the corner, this will come into play, and all these this anger that we've seen this week will really ramp up.
Daisy, Tom Green is in the top handful of best pure inside midfielders in the comp.
Pure inside mid, I could say fair dinkum to that. If you wanted to talk outside mid and mids with a combo of spread and whatnot, I probably would say Fugazi. But in terms of solely being a big bull who goes in and wins it, he's clean as a whistle, which you have to be, brings others into the game. He's a very important cog for that GWS footy club, and he's a lot of the reason why they went on to go so well. So I think that's fair dinkum.
Damo, Dan McStay is a bigger out for Collingwood than Taylor Adams.
Yeah, fair dinkum by some distance. I'm a massive Taylor Adams fan. I loved how he's carried himself, and I reckon I use that sporting phrase, he'd love to go to war with someone. I still reckon Taylor Adams is up in the top 2 or 3 people you would choose in that component. But McStay's role and the manner in which he's changed the Collingwood forward line, it all came out in the first 3 quarters of that preliminary final where he kicked 2 goals of the 8 they kicked to win the game by a point, and to not have him, given they'd basically planned to have him this time last year, got him in, played the role they wanted him to play, and now he's not there. It's huge.
Joey, the biggest head scratcher from the Brownlow is how Josh Dunkley only got 4 votes.
Oh, it's probably Fugazi. It's probably not the biggest head scratcher. I didn't think about it a lot. There are some players that just don't poll votes. Jordan De Goey polled 6 votes or 8 votes or something after the year that he had. He polled a really low number as well.
No, I think you got a bit more than that. 8, I think.
Yeah, 8 votes. So that's a low number for Jordan De Goey, who was on track for an All-Australian at the halfway mark of the year. So there's some players that, for whatever reason, don't catch the umpire's eye.
Daisy, concerns about Charlie Curnow's finals form is over the top.
Fair dinkum. There's no need to just jump on this bandwagon and start cutting a bloke down because he didn't have a real impact in terms of scoreboard domination in his couple of finals that he played. He's a young player still improving. It's the first look he's had at finals. He'll be better for it, and hopefully going forward, if the Blues are to play, he'll play better. And if he does, they'll go a long way to winning it.
I don't know if anyone's cutting him down, and I feel it's a valid...
There's a few that have piled in.
They've been talking about his reputation's been just diminished, or he's not he can't be
Well,
called a superstar.
I would argue it has. I think I personally take him out of best player in comp conversations on the back of... And then when you say finals, there were 3 of them.
Yeah. You
where
always
he
come
didn't
up against
perform
the very best defender. He's a young bloke who hasn't had a look at it before. He'll find different ways to be better in and around
Came
what
up
those
against
defenders...
the best defenders for 2 years in a row and came out as the best goal kicker in 2 consecutive seasons. I think the conversation's valid.
I think the conversation's valid. You can have your own point on it, but to cut him down and say that it tarnishes his reputation, I think is invalid.
So you'd still have him in the conversation for best player in the comp?
I'd have him in the conversation for best forward in the comp, absolutely.
Damo, the states of South Australia and Victoria need to send out an all-points bulletin warning the local authorities that Tex and Bernie are crossing the border together tomorrow.
Yeah, look, I did actually catch up briefly with Tex on Monday night, and partners are coming. So I think the worry that we all had last week, are you shaking your head? Are they not coming?
I don't think they're coming for the entire 4 days.
Well, I saw one, and she said she was coming. So anyway, if you've got different mail to what they've got, well, but all the same, it's Fugazi. They're mature men now, and their antics of maybe the late 2000s and early 2010s aren't as big an issue.
That last statement is Fugazi. You've seen how Burns presented a couple of times on the Saturday.
That's a very good point, actually. I don't think he knew he was on air one day.
Now, I don't want to bring the tension back up in the room with this topic, but Joey,
yes,
with Callum Mills busting his shoulder and having broken his foot playing American football in 2018,
delist him. He should be delisted. They shouldn't even be playing for the Swans.
He's a first ballot entry into the Weird Injuries Hall of Fame.
100% he is now, and a surprise one too. Callum Mills. Well, it seems like I don't really know him. He seems like a clean cut.
If it was Papley, you'd go, fair enough.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but strange one. But that's two. He wouldn't want a third. I tell you what, Damo will be coming for him.
Damo would drive up to Sydney and sack him himself.
Well, speaking of Damo, the over-under for the amount of times we'll hear the story about Lee Matthews telling Justin Lepich that without him, the Brisbane playing group would just... Sorry, without the Brisbane playing group, he'd only be the greatest player of all time, is about 47 and a half.
No, you've undercut that number. That's Fugazi. It's going to be 63.5, I reckon, that one. So the famous one, they were in the lift, weren't they, after one of the celebrations after it? And you've undercut that one.
Joey, Damien Barrett being invited to Gil McLaughlin's farewell is the starkest proof yet he's lost touch with the common man.
Who Gil or me?
No, that's Fugazi. Damo's been one of the best in the industry. He's most respected in the industry, so I would expect him to be invited. You're not speaking at it?
Thank you, Joe.
Are you speaking
I'm
at it?
definitely not speaking at it. No.
What is it? What's happening?
It's a party in South Yarra Parana.
Did you get a +1?
I did get a +1.
I'll come and diminish your reputation if you want.
Well, finally, another party for the AFL not organised by this man. So Daisy Thomas, the AFL need to hire Daisy Thomas as their party liaison.
That's fair dinkum. And I think I'd play the role perfectly. I wouldn't go over the top and make them all sort of 2 or 3 day events, but in terms of just making sure we can all have fun in a decent music or DJ, whatever you like.
Some wrestles?
Probably some
like
wrestles.
Callum Mills style wrestles.
I can get him as an offsider but I think that needs to happen because, as I said, the AFL functions, they do a great job. September Club is a completely different kettle of fish because that is really fun. But throughout the season, there is still a little bit straight.
Righto. Come 5:30 on Saturday, we'll have a brand new Premier. Yeah, that's the right word. I've got Dan Andrews in my head. A brand new Premier of Victoria and, of course, of the AFL will be Brisbane, or will it be Collingwood? We'll get your predictions coming up next on Triple M Footy's Midweek Rub. Keep it locked on Triple M on Grand Final Day from 8 a.m. We're at the live stage up until bounce at 2:30. It is Collingwood versus Brisbane in the 2023 Toyota AFL Grand Final. Joey, how do you see this game playing out?
Well, I think, to be honest, very similar to how I sort of saw last week's game going, where the numbers sort of said that Giants were going to own big parts of the game, and they did. I think it's going to be similar with Brisbane. I think Brisbane are going to have big portions of the game, Damo, where they'll control clearance and contest, and they'll play it in their front half. They're a really strong forward half team with the best turnovers and scoring in their forward half, like they did against Carlton pretty much after quarter time. So it'll be a cracking contest. But then, as I said last week, Collingwood just continue to find a way to win. And what they do is they do it in a burst. I've worked out, it's taken me a long time, Daisy, to work out that basically in every single one of their wins, they've had a little period where they've dominated the game, but they've put it on the scoreboard. So that 13-minute period in the quarter 3 against Giants, they kicked 5 goals. They only kicked 8 for the game. The week before against Melbourne in the first final, they only kicked 9 goals, but they kicked 5 in the first quarter and a little bit. Game over. So I think whenever that period comes for Collingwood, whether it's the start of the game, through the middle of the game, or if they're behind and they kick 5 goals in the last, they just find a way to win. I can't tip against them. I think they'll win another close game.
Hang on a minute. You're tipping the Pies.
Well, I said Collingwood.
You've
Hang
won them
on.
over.
I actually said before the Collingwood-Melbourne qualifying final, I was adamant that whoever won that qualifying final had one hand on the cup. And I thought at that time Melbourne would beat Collingwood because, again, of the profile. But as I've learnt, Collingwood just find a way. So I'm going to stick to it. That was the strong side of the draw. Brisbane are playing great. The MCG factor is real in regards to Collingwood's home ground. If it was at the Gabba, I'd probably tip Brisbane. Yep. I think Collingwood would find a way to get it done. They win by 3 points. And Norm Smith, you always try and get creative, don't you? You try and think outside the square. I can't go past Dacos or DeGoey. Literally one of them, if Collingwood win, they will be best on ground. I think Dunkley will go to DeGoey and do a pretty good job. So it sets up for Nick Dacos. I think he's had the one game under his belt. He looked better as the game went on.
Didn't he?
He will run around on grand final day and we will just be in awe. And he'll be a Norm Smith medalist. And that'll take care of the Brownlow that he should have won if he had have played every game.
I think the difference in this game when you look at it is the 3 forwards up at the Brisbane Lions end. If they can get on top, that's going to go a massive way. That is the difference. You look at the midfield, they're both pretty even. Collingwood's forward line via the Brisbane defenders pretty even. When you look at Hipwood, Danaher and Charlie Cameron, they could be the genuine X factor, kicking 2-3 goals themselves. They've averaged 110 points a game against the Pies in their last 5. So that has been an issue of how you stop those 3. Slightly nervous because of that, but I think the MCG, the Pies, can defend the ground, make it skinny, so get a lot of numbers in and around those 3, especially Charlie Cameron, and making sure he doesn't get out the back with whoever you go to, and then just burst, make the ground as big as possible. They'll score more than 8 goals. I'm pretty comfortable with that. And for that reason, I think the Pies can get it done by about 4 goals. Norm Smith medalist, I'm going to go with Scotty Pendlebury. You talk about tried form.
Yeah.
He's done it before. He's always in it. He's class. He's got time. He's got space.
He was great last week.
In games like this, that's when the whips are cracking. You need someone with a cool, calm head. I'm hoping for the fairy tale and Pendles wins it.
2-time Normie.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I'm still sticking with the Brisbane Lions. I felt they were the team going into the season if they could get it right. They did everything right, bar lose Ashcroft, which they could not control. And in a weird way, Fletcher, as a first-year player, has filled that little first-year player void anyway. I'm not at all worried about the MCG record. I've looked back to the last game they played against Melbourne late in the season. They were 4 goals up with 7.5 minutes to play. I reckon that endorsed their ability to play at the MCG as opposed to continue the problems in that space. And I reckon they bat deeper in the forward line. You've mentioned those 3 key forwards. I love them all. I love Cameron. They go deeper than that. You've got Rayner as well.
Could
You've
bob
got
up.
Bailey.
Zach Bailey could bob
You've got
up.
Bailey as well.
Lincoln McCarthy
Lincoln
could bob
McCarthy
up.
could kick 3 or 4. It wouldn't surprise anyone. So I feel they've got more goal-kicking options. And while you keep saying, Joey, and I am the same view as you, Collingwood find a way. I just feel Brisbane has got them, and they will find a way too. And I've got, I know you love this guy, Days, but I've got Zach Bailey as an outsider for the Norm Smith.
Absolutely. I think the fact that they were 27 points up against Melbourne, if they're 27 points up in the last quarter against the Pies, that is the one side you don't want coming, and those scars and those wounds will start to open. If it only is a little bit, the Lions certainly won't forget about that, but I hope it's a cracking game.
It should be. There's no reason why it won't be a cracking game. I think Brisbane, they'll be up for the fight, and you know Collingwood will be. I think this will be one of the greats. Yep.
So you've tipped Collingwood, Daisy's tipped Collingwood, you've tipped the Lions, and you've said Pendles as your Norm Smith days. You've said Zach Bailey, and you have said
Nick Dacos.
Oh, there you go. Hey, before we wrap up the podcast, just a quick thank you to the boys out in the booth. Rudy for putting the podcast together all season. He's the one eating fruit all the time in the videos, and next to him is Beersy, and of course Jasper looks like Luigi up the back. So thank you, boys.
Thanks, boys.
And of course, Matty Hayward for building the podcast every day and putting it out on Triple M.
And what about
yourself too, Rabsy?
You put us
you
on
won
the
an
map.
award
The
on
rising
the
star
show.
on the back of this show.
Next big thing in media, you won off the back of this.
We carried you or you carried us?
I would say you very much carried me.
That's not what you say.
If anyone heard the live read from last week, they'll understand.
Rabsy, you're on Triple M, mate. Take all the credit yourself, right?
Make sure you keep it locked in on Triple M and the Listener app for every minute of Grand Final Day. We will be there from 8 a.m. from the MCG live start, and then it is the best call in the business. Luke Darcy, Mark Howard, Jason Dunstall, Nathan Brown, Ash Chua, and Mickey Roberts as Collingwood win the 2023 Premiership.
Hey.